So, why does denial attach itself so rigidly to anger?
Because anger is a cover emotion. Anger covers fear, and fear covers sadness. So underneath all denial is tremendous unhealed pain, overwhelming unhealed sadness and pain that we don't have. Well, most people don't even have the awareness that that's what's going on. They're completely detached from their authenticity. No one's taught them how any of this works, so they're not bad or to blame. They're just doing the best they can. One of the difficulties is both the Freuds, Sigmund brought it up first, but Anna really developed the 9 denial mechanisms, and they classified denial as a defense mechanism. I personally believe it starts that way because we don't have the emotional capabilities. We've never taught emotional mastery. Emotional intelligence just came on the scene about 20 years ago, and it's the leaf, that started the conversation. Mm-hmm. So we're so underdeveloped emotionally that all we can do is go into denial. It does defend us from overwhelming trauma and emotional events, especially as a child, but even as an adult, hurricanes, deaths, whatever it may be. The problem is because we haven't taught emotional mastery and true emotional development and self-awareness and management of our emotions, it doubles back and becomes an attack mechanism. That's what my new book shows, is how denial needs to be reclassified, that no one's really touched it since the Freuds. And I contend that they need to rewrite the book on denial. Yes, it starts as a defense, but when left unexamined and unhealed, it destroys us. And one of the greatest ways it destroys us is through anger. Because is relationship possible with overwhelming amounts of anger?
No.
Who would you spend around any time around somebody who's constantly angry and acting that out, whether directly or indirectly? And there are all the various ways we can express our anger: passive aggressive, being quiet, shut down, detached, dismissive. It's not always yelling and screaming in our face. Anger is displayed in a myriad of ways. And so it's attacking not only the other person, but most of all ourselves. It's a self-sabotaging mechanism that we get to decide if we want to address. Now, if we don't address it, we will victimize ourselves with it repeatedly the rest of our lives. Well, I don't consider that defensive. I consider that offensive to us and then the people we infect with our self-deception. Because ultimately, when we're in denial, we are deceiving ourselves. We think we're angry at them. Underneath it, it's an expression of unhealed sadness within us. We are deceiving ourselves. And that's why they get so heavily attached. We don't know that we're attacking ourselves.
So are you saying that a person is constantly pointing out the faults and flaws of other people in a very berating manner is a person that is experiencing what you just mentioned?
Yeah, that's me. I don't always berate, but there are times where look at my platform. I'm basically saying to the world, you're all defective. That's not really what I'm saying, but that's how many people hear me because of their denial and everything I just discussed. They will hear me that way. They can't hear my heart. That what I'm really offering is a lifeline of connection and to save us both from ourselves. And so, yes, you're right that whenever we judge, blame, hate, criticize anyone or anything, especially politics, social movements, any of that stuff, they're displacing their self-deception, denial, and which is a cover for really their sadness, onto the cause or that they're supporting, or the cause that they're hating, or the person or the place or the thing. All of that is displacement of sadness. And if I can, like you mentioned earlier, we're talking about control. If I can get control of you, I'll feel control in myself. So if I can change your beliefs and how you act and interact with the world, I will finally be at peace. Well, as we both know, the only person we can ever control is ourselves. And so we're avoiding that responsibility. Remember what a child does. A child makes excuses and blames.
Right.
Projects outwards, whereas an adult takes responsibility and puts a plan in place. And so the act of blaming, of judging, criticizing, of displacing our anger on somebody else is a childlike response. Now, there is the anger in itself is very healthy. It's not an emotion we want to get rid of, because anger is ultimately stop. You're hurting me. It is a defense, but it's rarely ever used appropriately as a proper defense mechanism. It is almost exclusively used to hide sadness, because we only know about the leaf on the emotional tree. We don't know about the seed. We haven't dealt with the seed. And so we're missing all of the proper skills that anger provides us and is good for us. And instead, we're primarily using the leaf against ourselves.
Interesting, because what you're saying is that anger, when you don't have emotional mastery, can easily be used aggressively like a knife, like a weapon. But when you do have emotional mastery, it's used as like an alarm system, like a notification center, right? Like, oh, notification center in the sense of, hey, this is not okay, or this needs to be done, or that didn't get done, and this needs to be addressed, right?
It's an alarm system for both people.
Yeah.
Because stop means you're about to go against yourself, because it's not innate to be destructive towards somebody. That's a learned behavior or an adaptive response. Right. All right. And so when we use anger appropriately and go, stop, don't do that.
Right.
We're protecting ourselves from mistreatment. But what people don't realize is when somebody victimizes somebody else, they're mistreating themselves too. They don't want to do that. I mean, there are some people genetically, psychopathy, or, their genes got distorted and they're born that way. It's not an adaptive response. All right. Mm-hmm. Those people are not born with the capacity. And so they can inflict evil, but they don't know that they're inflicting evil. That's the disconnect. They don't know. Right. Now, for everybody else, they do know. They may not consciously know, but their authentic self knows that they're going against themselves. And so healthy anger of stop, don't do that, or whatever, is a boundary that protects us both from victimizing ourselves and then taking that self-victimization and dumping it on the other person. So healthy anger is a protection for us both, not just us from being perpetrated against, but from the so-called angry person perpetrating against themselves. Right. So it's loving to say, that's why I say no is the most loving thing you can ever say to anyone. Not yes, not the nice person, yes, I'll do this for you. Because mm-hmm. that always ends up in repressed anger and rage. So they'll take it out on us eventually. But a true healthy, just doesn't work for me. That's love.
Yeah.
Now I'm safe.
That's what's called, or Dr. Augustus Masters calls heart anger. He describes anger in 4 ways as far as what to do with it, which is anger in, suppress, anger out, aggression, mindful anger, which can be rationalizing it. It can have some benefits, of realizing things. But then heartfelt anger, which is you embody put the body in place to work with the mind. So as far as what needs to be done, which is what you expressed, a boundary needs to be expressed. A loving thing needs to be acted on.
Yeah.
A truly loving thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's this part of development, by the way, the development for me has been monumental because it's part of what got me. It recovered my assertiveness. It, I guess, developed. That sounds like I ever had it. Maybe I did as a child and it was removed, right? But that's how I see it. You know, it's recovered my assertiveness to a great degree where now I can have better boundaries with myself, and because of that, better boundaries with others. And so my colleagues respect me more. My boss respects me more. I follow through on things, right? I face things head on, right? Instead of avoiding. If I made a mistake, for example, no. Boundary means I'm going to go ahead and apologize and own and say, I need to change my behavior. I need to do this to follow through properly.
And repressed anger is a primary driver of most autoimmune diseases. And it took me years to be able to feel, express, and experience anger in any form. My counselor tried to get me to do some anger work, and he left the office for me to take a foam bat to a ball in the office, and I yelled and screamed, and I was like this, even as I'm yelling and screaming, so like I'm doing the act of expressing anger. It had no effect. I was so I just felt, I'm like, this is just stupid. This is wrong. I should, because I was not allowed to be angry. And so the concept of saying no and being appropriately angry at mistreatment, I can still struggle with it. But that's one area I've really improved on. And my ability to say no is really good.
Yeah.
That's one skill that, yeah, I've gotten really good. That's really, and that was something I didn't even know that you could say no. I didn't know that. Like, that just seems so far-fetched. But that's how detached I was, is I didn't know that I could ever say no. I never knew it was an option. Just didn't know.
Well, the experience of starting to develop this ability can be so scary at first because letting anger out it can be quite explosive. Like, I remember my first days, I went from like super nice guy to other side of the pendulum, which was wanting to scream at everybody for any little thing and curse at everyone, and I hate everyone and the world is so messed up, right? Completely pessimistic mentality. And it took a couple of swings back and forth, because then you see yourself there and are like, oh, maybe I'm being way too aggressive now. With my anger's out of control. I got to be nice. And it's like, no, I can't be nice. I got to go back here. And it's like, it's this journey that eventually the pendulum starts swinging closer to that center, which is what I hear you saying. It's moderation, right? And maturity. And, I think that's a journey of its own, because sometimes it can begin to swing extremely again. But what I have found is, yes, that the opening of that door can be scary at first. Scary because you maybe have a lot of suppressed stuff and you don't know what's going to come out. Maybe a whole freaking monster, the boogeyman's about to let out of the cage, right? Be let out. Or maybe scared about what it's going to do to your family relationships and your romantic relationship, your marriage, your kids, right? You're scared of that. Or maybe scared about how it's going to affect your finances, performance at work, with clients, or your business. And in my experience, what I can share, at least as a point of reassurance for people, that yes, it can be scary, but yes, it is absolutely worth it, is coming back to what you just said. Like, there's always a lesson and a growth that happens from the things that we can perceive as my life falling apart. So if something falls apart, quote unquote, because of you taking this journey of finally opening the door to your anger that's been suppressed, for example, for so long, well, it may rock your life. Dr. Robert Glover, in his book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, says, Be aware that reading the information in this book probably will dismantle your entire life.
Yeah, I should have that disclaimer in my books. I like that. I'm going to steal that.
It's a disclaimer that it is what it is. But you know what? There's so much freedom, and I can say this from experience. You know, you as well. There's so much freedom once you come out the other side.
It needs to dismantle your life. Your life isn't working. That's the process of change.
Yeah.
You're stuck in the worst day cycle, repeating it. It's never going to get better when you keep doing what you're doing. And you have to do it differently. And yes, it's a good thing those relationships end and that part of your life ends, because it's destructive. It has to end. And you're right, we're afraid of that. Well, that's the adapted, wounded child false persona that does not want to let go. Some people call it the shadow, the ego. There are all these different, terms for it. It's all the same thing. And that's the child inside of us, the hurt child who develops skills to try and create attachment. It's like, look, if you kill me off, I have no attachment to my parents. Now, that's not true, but it doesn't know that. It needs a life experience that shows it something is different. Well, now that we're adults, it's our responsibility to put a plan in place, learn that, so we can be the parent for that child that thinks, if I stop this behavior, I'll die. We need to teach it. That's our job. Now we are the parent we never had. And so, like, for me, like, my anger, my older brother was huge, 4 years older, and he's still, I don't know, 4 inches taller, and he could hold me by my head, just control me, and just pummel me. So the only way I could express anger was, and he's one of the smartest people ever, and one of the greatest wits ever, and he could eviscerate me with sarcasm and degrading cuts. I could never keep up with him. And so because he was so big, and the consequence was going to be so severe, like, I literally threw knives at him, chairs at him. Like, I had to be far away from him. I'd have to try and assault him and then run and lock myself in a bathroom. And I could be there 8, 10, 12 hours. My parents wouldn't defend me, but I had to wait. And so in the early forms of getting angry, I was the type, slam the door and run. I was anger flight. Like, I can't, it's not like the body of me just freaks out. It's like, I've got to run from this anger. Yeah. I don't know how to stay and embody the no, stay present and adult without the child coming up, be mature and moderate and expressing it. I'd just go right back into that flight, or I'd fawn and collapse, and you just drive a tank over me, and that's the inability to say no and all the other things. So what did that require? One, I had to create the awareness of, why do I run? Oh, that's why. I ran because of my older brother. I collapsed because of my father. Second I opened my mouth, if I disagreed, he was huge too. Like, I was in my late 20s. Whenever I looked at my dad, I saw this huge apparition, like, as though somebody was about 10 feet tall and about 4 or 5 feet wide. I never saw my father as a man who was 2 inches taller. And it took me years before I could actually see my father. He was always huge.
Well, no. Sorry.
Dad.
Excuse me.
Don't worry about it. And that happens to a lot of us.
Yeah.
And so we don't know where, and people with anger issues don't know where it's coming from. They don't know what's happening, which stage they're in, what part they need to address. Like there's so much wrapped up into it, because think of both of those situations. Remember, your question started with, why is there so much denial wrapped up into anger? Well, both of those situations for me are horrifically sad. And so everyone wants to avoid the sadness, the darkness, the pain, the tough stuff. But the only way you end the sadness is to become an expert in seeking it. The answer, it's a paradox. That's the problem with the personal development field and the positivity movement, is you never gain true peace and positivity, because they're advocating the avoidance of all of that. And, oh, just accept it, just move on. It's just, all those buzzwords. No. What your inner child needs is a new emotional experience that proves to it it can survive it. And the only way it gets it is if the adult us commits to doing the transformational work to show it. And then it'll let go and let us lead. And then we get the maturity and moderation. But remember, everything we do is motivated by emotion, not thought. And so we'll never let go of the anger unless we deal with the underlying sadness and all of that dark pain. That's our pathway to peace and positivity. It's a paradox. It's always in the opposite.
Beautifully put.
And so think of what you're describing. That's what you did. You just mentioned, rattled off 2 or 3 books. You just went in there, and keep going in there and keep developing and keep experiencing, keep having moments where you mentioned the swinging of the pendulum and, okay, I'm going to try it this way. No, that's too much. Oh, that's what happens. If you're over here on the scale, when you learn a new skill, you go way over here, Maturity and moderation is somewhere in the middle, but part of the learning curve is swinging that pendulum from side to side here until you get here, and then recognizing that even while you're here, you're going to have moments on either side, and it's okay. You're human and limited. And see, that's what that inner child needs, is that adult experience of us letting him know, it's okay, buddy. We're good here. You know.
And there's a joy in finding the comedy, not the avoidant comedy, but the comedy of everyday life.
Yeah.
Comedy of, oh, look at what I did there. Like, isn't that funny? Like how I reacted. That's interesting. Okay, I guess I'm gonna do this. Right.
That's
So
acceptance.
yeah, not being so hard on ourselves for messing up or showing
A sure sign of a detachment from your authenticity and your inherent worth is judging, blaming, and criticizing yourself. That tells me you're in a child state, because at all times, no matter what we do, we always have worth. So you'll always know if you're adult, mature, and moderate, if you're okay with not everything being okay.